How does a master analyze a chess game compared to a 1700 rated player? What does a master see that a 1700 doesn't see? In this video, I'm going to analyze a game played by none other than Magnus Carlsen and Levon, a game that Levy, or GothamChess, claimed was Magnus's best game ever played. Then, after my analysis, we're going to look at Levy's analysis, which I have not yet seen, and compare how I'm seeing things versus a master. Hopefully you learned a thing or two in this video. I know I will. We're going to be looking from Magnus's point of view, which is from the white pieces, against Levon playing the black pieces, and let's just jump right into it. So we get d4 from Magnus, and then knight f6 from Levon, c4, so looking like it's going into a kind of queen's gambit. I don't actually play queen's gambit, I play d4, but I play a London, so already a lot of this theory is going to be sort of lost on me. And so computer saying Nimzo Indian variation, so I guess the bishop is probably coming out to b4. All right, that being said, this looks pretty typical so far, and Levon does go for bishop b4. If I were white, I'd be thinking of if I were white, I'd be thinking of where to put this dark square bishop, because eventually you want to play e3 and develop your light square bishop. You know, this pin right here, I think that in the Nimzo, you often just want to snap the knight off, like you just trade the bishop for the knight. I can try going knight e4, but I don't think that's going to really do much, so let's see what happens here. So Magnus takes on d5. Okay, which makes some sense. Okay, and then there's bishop g5. So this to me, this makes some sense as well, just because the bishop, black's dark square bishop is out here, you know, pinning our knight. This pins black's knight, so they're not jumping to e4 anytime soon, and it seems like it'd be kind of a waste of a move for black to have to bring the bishop back. So it's not like this pin is dangerous at the moment, but it puts a little bit of pressure on that knight on f6, and then Levon responds immediately with h6. So if I were playing white, would not think to trade off that dark square bishop right away, just because generally I think like I want to hold on to the bishop pair if I can. So I'm curious to see. Okay, so Magnus actually takes the knight on f6, and then Levon takes back with the queen. Here, obviously they're putting a little bit of pressure on that d4 pawn. The first move that's kind of screaming out to me here is just playing e3 to develop that light square bishop to one of those, well, not that square, but and then deciding whether bishop takes on c3 is a big deal or not, just because you would have that kind of backwards weak pawn. But let's see what Magnus does. Okay, yeah, so there's actually the queen a4 check, but of course black has knight c6 that blocks the check and defends the bishop. And then at this point I would think maybe potentially adding more pressure to that pinned knight, but I don't think there's really much of a threat there. It's just kind of developing. But, you know, white is putting a little bit of pressure and just keeping that bishop honest, let's say. Okay, and then Magnus goes e3. So honestly, everything up until now seems like pretty standard. There's not been any crazy moves. This is all probably just theory. So this is the Rogozin defense. Queen's gambit declined, Rogozin defense. All right, Magnus develops the bishop to e2 instead of d3, and so as for why that is, because typically, you know, bishop d3 is a more active square. Sometimes you line up like a battery, queen bishop battery, but he's going bishop e2, and I'm guessing in this case it's because he's just keeping an eye on that light square bishop coming out and pinning, well, just not even pinning, but putting pressure on the knight on f3. Okay, so Levon goes bishop e6. That makes some sense. White castles. And Levon plays a6. So my initial thoughts are, you know, obviously potentially preparing b5. Is there anything happening beyond that? Not exactly sure at this point. We get rook c1. And so one thing to note here is that Magnus goes rook f to c1 and not rook a to c1. So he wants to keep this rook over here, or in any case taking on that weak c7 pawn, just putting some pressure down the c file, activating the rook. Levon goes back with a bishop on d6, and so first thing that I notice is just that it seems like a very solid, sturdy structure. Magnus goes back with the queen to d1. I would think that going back to c2, I might consider that move, but queen c2, you know, sometimes you want the rook in front of your queen, not your queen in front of your rook. Oh, to be attacked, but also there's knight b4. So yeah, queen d1 to avoid knight b4. Levon goes back with the knight, drops the knight back. My initial thoughts are he's preparing like pushing that c-pawn. And then Magnus plays a3, rook over to d8, b4. So Magnus is now kind of going for a queenside expansion. He's taking away some squares from the dark square bishop, which makes sense for the moment. And then Levon rotates the knight over to c8. So he's doing a lot of dancing around with the knight. My guess is that maybe he's going to b6 and eyeing that c4 square. So, okay, Magnus plays knight a4. Obviously, he has the c5 square available to him. I'm not sure if that would be the best move, but he's also stopping knight b6, so maybe that was just a prophylaxis move. Okay, and then Levon plays b6, so now the knight to c5 is not available anymore. It does potentially weaken that c7 pawn, but, you know, black can always push that forwards, I suppose. Okay, Magnus drops the knight back. Looks like it kind of did its job, and now it's rotating back around. You don't want a knight to stay there on a4. Okay, Levon brings his knight back to e7. Interesting. So that looks like a pretty natural move, like knight d3 just looks like a pretty good square. It's definitely better than back here on b2. And Levon plays knight g6. Yeah, a lot of knight moves from Levon. And it looks like both players are kind of hesitant to like make any big commitments or push forwards, just like these tiny little minute changes in the position, which I think you often see with, you know, Grandmaster games. I'm not really sure where that knight's going, to be honest. And then we get a4 from Magnus. This, you know, makes some sense because it's just taking away more squares. The b4 pawn is also covered by the knight. Also, one thing to point out too is that when Levon played b6, he really weakened this c6 square. So now I'm thinking a rook would love to live there if it weren't for bishop d7. So at some point, one of White's pieces, I think, would love to have that square. Okay, Levon plays a5, which looks like a pretty good move to me. Other than, I mean, I'm guessing Magnus is going to play b5 just to really clamp down on that square. Taking doesn't seem to be a great option because then he can always take back with the rook and start putting pressure on the a4 pawn. Okay, and then we get rook over to e8. Why not? Not exactly sure why there. Rook c3. So he could potentially be looking to double up the rooks. And then Levon plays bishop f5. Looks like he moved the rook over to open up the file and put some pressure down that file with his rook and then move the bishop over. But I'm not sure if he's actually planning on taking that knight. I don't think that would be the greatest move, but... Okay, so Magnus does double the rooks up. Now he has this kind of permanent pressure on the c7 pawn, which I think right off the bat would indicate to me that White has a small advantage here because these pawns are very difficult to attack. They're solid. This pawn structure is totally frozen, and Black now has this permanent weakness. White doesn't really have any considerable weaknesses in terms of their pawn structure for the moment, so wow, okay. Magnus goes back to knight to d2. So my thinking is he wants to he's thinking of either pushing the f pawn, which I don't think is actually realistic, or he's trying to clear up the bishop, because, you know, otherwise, like, this knight is not going anywhere else that I can see. Like, even knight b3 doesn't make any sense, so it's not exactly obvious to me what that knight move is about. But I'm guessing it's to open up the bishop for some reason. Okay, so Levon plays rook d7. Just adding some more protection to the c-pawn, I guess. And then we get g3, which is a pretty committal move, I guess, because this does, like, kind of weaken the white squares, and Black does have a light squared bishop. But you know, it's not really that big of a deal because White does as well, and Magnus can easily drop his bishop back, and not the easiest move to find. But okay, Levon goes back, knight back to f8, and I would guess he's doing some kind of maneuvering, but this doesn't make any sense. So where's that knight going? I would think maybe here. Yeah, maybe knight h7 and then knight g5, looking to take advantage of those weak squares. And then Magnus plays bishop g4. So now he's wanting to trade off light squared bishops, which I guess makes sense. If he takes, obviously, it's kind of helping Magnus develop, getting his queen out there. And then, okay, knight h7, like I said, bishop takes, queen takes, and then Magnus goes for a queen trade. Pretty interesting. And mind you, if Levon takes that queen, if Magnus takes back, that knight is kind of stuck. Like, he's not going anywhere, and these weak squares are no longer really an issue. And then you have a then you have a dark square bishop that is pretty, you know, inactive. Like doesn't have a lot of life. I would prefer these knights over that one dark square bishop. So Levon avoids the queen trade. Magnus plays h4, which again looks like a pretty solid move because these light squares are no longer weak. And I would think like white can always play king g2 or something just to further guard those squares. Okay, Levon goes back. Finally, we get rook c6, and this is interesting because earlier I was saying how that light square bishop was kind of what's stopping rook c6, you know? And now there's no longer that light square bishop, which might have been intentional, like Magnus saw that all along. Okay, we have this hole on c6. The bishop is the one thing that can kind of guard that weakness. Now that bishop's gone. He traded those bishops off. It's gone. This is a permanent weakness. White will always have pressure down this c file. And then knight f6. Not exactly sure where that knight is going other than just getting it off that terrible h7 square. All right, knight f4. So I'm guessing if black chose to take, Magnus would take with the queen, but this just looks like a good developing move. He's getting his knight closer to black's position, taking up some more squares, and then Levon plays g6, adding some more protection to the king side, but taking away some squares from the knight. Okay, well, Magnus goes for h5. So let's see, because if g5, okay, so yeah, the d5 pawn is actually hanging. There's some things to watch out for though, because there's that discovered attack from the rook, but d5 is technically hanging. And Levon does not take. Taking looks like a bad choice, so Levon doesn't do that. He pushes the king forward, just adding some more protection, I think, to these kingside pawns. Magnus takes on g6, and now we get knight takes on d5. So if knight takes, queen takes, that bishop is free to do whatever they want and give that discovered attack on the queen. So he goes for that still, but Magnus probably saw this. Interesting though. Queen goes back to g2, just guarding that f2 pawn. Now black is forced to either move that bishop or add some protection to it, but probably going to move it. All right, so he goes back, and then Magnus goes knight c4, which looks like a pretty good move. This rook is not ever being attacked. I don't know if he's actually thinking of going knight e5, but this knight is going somewhere. Interesting though, because like the king side is blown up for Magnus, but he doesn't seem to mind. He's probably, you know, obviously he's calculated this. And then Levon plays rook f8. So you guys can see already the evaluation bars. White has an advantage here. My best guess is just simply that weak c7 pawn. All right, so we do see knight e5. I'm just curious because if bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes, aha. Okay, so this is very interesting because bishop takes, we actually can throw in, he can throw in queen g6 check, or with the queen or with the rook. So that's, again, not the easiest find for me, at least for a player like myself. Because otherwise you would just see, oh, well, bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes. We just like gave up a free pawn and kind of ruined our pawn structure a little bit. Levon takes, and then we get queen takes, g6 check, intermezzo move. And then I'm guessing very precise. Once again, first he's going to take with another check on h6. That's another free pawn. And this is already, yeah, I mean, obviously this is looking really bad for black. The bishop's hanging. He can take that bishop when he wants to. So he takes the bishop now, instead of, for example, like, I don't know, rook check. Because the king escapes. That's something to keep an eye out. You don't want that king escaping if possible. So he grabs on e5, takes back the bishop. Now we get rook g6 check, king f7, rook c4. Wow. So what happens? Aha. If king e8, we win the queen. So actually the king is not so safe. Where is this rook going? I guess, I mean, this check, it still doesn't seem to, we can give this check and force the king back and then win the queen. Maybe that's what he's going for, but is there anything better? I'm not sure. Let's see. So Levon throws in queen a1 check, but just kind of buying time, it looks like. Attacks the queen, but it's too late. There's too many checks for white. Check. This rook is guarded by the queen, by the way, but what's the best continuation here? I'm curious. I'm just guessing rook e7 check. Okay, rook e7 check. And then we get rook e4 check. Like, so it's pretty obvious that white's winning here. White has the initiative. They have all these checks, and at some point they're probably going to pick up the rook or force the queens off. And Magnus is up a pawn. So this was a pretty interesting game, but mostly to me just because it was like all these small, minute improvements to the position that, like, for me as a 1700 kind of go way over my head. I'll be curious to see what Levy says about this being, you know, the best game Magnus has ever played, because it's not like watching, you know, a towel game or like some crazy, you know, tons of sacrifices and brilliant moves. So let's take a look at Levy's. So let's just jump right into it. I'm going to start where Levy
D4 from Magnus,
analyzing the game
Knight
right away.
F6 from Levon. Actually, kind of standard. We saw this when Nc3 beat Magnus Carlsen in the other game from the best game series. Knight C3 and Bishop B4, a Rogozin defense. Very popular for many years now at the top level of chess. So Magnus takes on D5, clarifying the situation in the center.
Why do all chess
plays Bishop
openings
to G5,
sound so freaking cool?
the knight to the queen. One plays H6, targeting the bishop, and here white can either back up or take. Magnus decides to make this trade, and now play the move queen to A4 check. What this does is it attacks the bishop and the king. Black has to play knight C6, and that move kind of hinders black's queenside movement. Like, as long as white is now going to be able to develop quickly, this knight is going to have to move at some point. Otherwise, it's going to be kind of difficult to guard this, and this...
So that's something to point out. I am familiar with this because I play the London system, that oftentimes knight c6 is an inaccuracy or a mistake simply because it blocks that c-pawn. It looks like in this position, Levy spots that queen a4 check forces that knight out to c6, which is going to prevent those pawns. It just kind of weakens that pawn structure, and like you said, that knight is going to have to move again. And that was apparently the whole point of queen a4 check.
This knight will become a target in the future when these pawns slowly make their way up the board. But for now, Magnus just plays e3, black castles, and bishop e2. It's better to put the bishop here than here, because here it guards the knight. And if black ever played bishop to g4, he would have been attacking the knight with two different pieces.
That's right about that.
So the bishop is on e2 now, rather than being on d3. You still obviously cannot take this, you're looking to castle. Levon plays bishop e6, short castle, a6. This move is intending this move, and stopping the knight from coming to b5. So we get rook c1. Now, why does Magnus play rook fc1? Well, this kind of shows his class. Both of these moves are possible, rook a and rook f, but the point is that he understands that there's really no danger of the rook leaving the king. And so what he'll do is he will bring his queen back and then use the queen side to expand.
That kind of answers the question
to have two rooks
as to why rook f
than one.
to c1.
If this rook stayed on f1, then it wouldn't take part in the queenside advancement. So Magnus is showing his first kind of poke. I'm going to expand on the queenside. So knight e7. Obviously, black wants to restructure with c6 and bring this knight over here. Magnus plays the move a3. This is a very, I call them Magnesian wrinkles. Normally, white just goes knight a4 to try to go knight c5 and create play on that side of the board. Magnus plays a3. Now, here the theory move has always been g7, g5. So black basically says, all right, man, you put your rooks over there, so I'm going to start attacking your king and make you have to worry about this side of the board. Levon chooses not to do that in this game, opting for just putting a rook in the center, and the game goes on. Magnus plays b4. Why is he doing this?
Seems, by the way, like just the g5 would have been better, or more aggressive.
Look at how many pawns are on the dark squares. I talk about this a lot in a lot of my videos. You need to replace the dark squared complex with pawns, right? If you've traded off your dark squared bishop, negating the power of the bishop on d6.
Levon plays dark square bishop is practically useless now.
Potentially eyes this square, actually, because he wants to play knight here and knight to c4.
Okay.
And so now Magnus does go indeed for the move knight a4, focusing on the c5 square. Oh, sorry, I drew the wrong arrow there. Focusing on the c5 square. So this is how good Magnus is. First wave, he's pressuring on the queen side. b6. Understandable move, covering this square. For a guy like Magnus, the move b6 does a few things. Yes, black gets control of this, but at what cost? Black has weakened the a6 pawn. It is no longer protected by a pawn. Black has also weakened the c6 square. Not a
So I
single
hadn't spotted
piece
the
in
A6
the
pawn
black
being
position now
weakened as
covers
well.
that square. All right, Magnus's work on the queen side is done. He doesn't continue to focus with moves like b5, knight back to b2. What? What is this? Magnus is routing toward the center. So step one has been to weaken the queen side, and now he transfers over. Levon says, all right, I'm down for that. I'm not gonna get this plan. All right, I'm gonna come here and fight for the e5 square. Knight d3, knight g6. Now Magnus says, well, now that I've gotten your knight away from that side of the board, whoever said I was done with the c5 square? a4. The knight defends the pawn on b4, and now this pawn can come forward. When the knight was here, it wasn't protecting this. That would have just been a free pawn. Yes, you can take on c7, because the bishop guards.
Just crazy.
But Magnus is doing this the right way.
Because it looks like in that case, he rerouted the knight back to d3, not only to play a4 so that b4 pawn was protected, but like it's, you know, he's seeing things so far in advance, and the ideas are pretty well thought out, let's say.
Wait, he's prodding for this move a5. So for example, had Black played in the game, Black played a5 himself and stopped it. But if Black plays, you know, for example, bishop f5, Magnus goes a5, and nothing is good here for Black. Like, it's still in the balance, but it's really difficult here for Levon to make a decision. Because if he takes, Magnus first of all can take with the rook and pressure both these pawns. He can also take with the pawn. This is a weakness. He's now got a second file, and that pawn is still in the line of sight of the bishop. If you just move this knight, this rook will forever be glued to defending that pawn. That rook is never going to get into the game. But if Levon pushes b5, he's completely given this square away. I'll just plant my knight there, and I'm going to continue to expand on that side of the board. So for that reason, Levon played a5 himself. Now Magnus plays b5.
That's kind of over my head, like
the queen side, the square has
those pawn moves, like you know, other than pushing forwards with b5 and closing things down and then like clamping down in the c6 square, everything that Levy was just talking about is a little bit over my head. I would find it pretty hard to find the moves he was just talking about.
It's been grasped, and he will never let go of it. Now the next stage of the game begins. Rook e8, rook c3. He doubles the rooks on the c-file, both guys in the game. Next piece comes. So how does Magnus begin to make progress here? He's looking around the board. He's going, which piece is the most integral to the black position? Which piece is my biggest adversary?
Yeah, right here is really
now
hard to find improving moves.
Knight d2. What on earth does that answer? That moves another piece away. Where's this knight even going? It can't even go anywhere. You're about to find out. Levon plays rook d7, potentially looking to double stack, double the rooks on this file. Also, it's just not easy for Black to make a move here because he can't move a lot of pieces. You know, he could have played queen h4, but again, you're not going to mate Magnus. He'll just play g3. And yes, he's moving a pawn in front of his king, but look at, again, the dark squared complex of pawns. Like, this is nothing. This knight can't come forward. The queen can hang out here, but we'll kick the queen out. That's not scary, right? So, rook d7 from Levon, and now g3. This move just blocks out the bishop temporarily. And now on knight f8, we see the whole point of the move knight d2. Magnus plays bishop g4. And by the way, if Magnus had tried to play bishop g4 in this position,
forces the bishops off too, by the way. I hadn't pointed that out, that, you know, because of that rook being skewered, like, it forces the bishops off.
Maybe there are some tactics with the move queen h4. I don't think they quite work. But Magnus just cuts everything out of h4. You know, for example, if queen h4, I think you can just call the bluff. I don't actually think you're getting mated here. King comes, and you're safe. The knight can't check you because it's covered, so it looks like you're okay. And if the queen comes back, you just have g4 here, and it hits and it protects as well. So, but he plays g3 to be extra solid. And now, the second Levon goes back, bishop g4. That's the point of knight d2. He moved the knight out of the way of the bishop. Why is this trade so important? Why is this trade so important? Because now the center is further destabilized. The only pawn on d5...
I didn't spot.
Sorry, I should say the only light squared pawn is on d5 for black, right? All on this side of the board, on that side of the board. And by destabilizing the light squares, Magnus now leaves himself with 2 knights, which can fight on the light squares. The dark squared bishop can now fight on the light squares. So he's got a bit of an imbalance there. And then he even goes for a queen trade. Why? Because if you trade queens, this pawn has no guard anymore. It's going to be a lot harder to protect.
Yeah, so Levy's spotting much more emphasis on that weak d5 pawn. I always focus more on the c7 pawn, but it's true that, like, if the queen is off the board, the knight is, you know, and the rooks are the only thing that can protect this pawn, but it's going to be really hard to do so because, like, where is this bishop going to go? So, yeah, this makes some sense, but I didn't spot that.
Notice how we've done damage on the queen side. We've tried to fake toward the center. Now we're doing some work on the king side. h4. That was the other idea of g3. That was the other idea of g3. Long term to hit the queen away from the center of the board. Queen e7. Now, don't just go grabbing. If you grab, I come out with the bishop. I hit your queen and I hit your rook, and you lose material. You might still be okay, but no need to do this. Magnus stays patient and plays the move rook c6. What does this do? It maintains a lock and a bind on that side of the board. The rook pressures in all the directions, here, here, and once the bishop moves, it's just like turning the screw deeper on pressure in the position. Levon brings the knight back to f6, and now it's time to play knight f4 with some pressure here. If the bishop were to take, then we get queen f6 deeper on pressure in the position. Levon brings the knight back to f6, and now it's time to play knight f4 with some pressure here. If the bishop were to take, then we get queen f4, and we see the other weakness taking effect. If rook c8, that doesn't actually stop anything because of this. The point of rook c6, the pressure on this pawn
I didn't spot that tactic.
And like this, every move he plays ties together. So Levon plays g6, trying to maybe play h5, and Magnus just doesn't even let him get there. He plays h5 himself. Now if black takes, he's opening the position. If he plays g5, now you can grab, because after take, queen takes. If the move bishop a3 were to happen, queen f5. You say, Levy, what's the big deal? I just take. Rook takes h6, and you can't stop mate. If you play f6, I play check, and I'm in there. This.
That's
Every
crazy.
Move the man plays ties together. The move h5.
Yeah, I hadn't calculated that far
taking.
into this position.
As distant as it all seems, this move allows you to take this pawn in the future. Think about that. 3 pieces have to move for this plan to work. And yet it works. It all works. King g7, a trade to destabilize further, and now it's time to take. He does get this move with the discovered attack, but Magnus just backs up. How do you protect? You've got to bring it back, but now the knight comes. The knight that hasn't been playing. The knight comes again, hits the rook, which Levon moved there ages ago, and the pawn. And after bishop takes, you don't take back. It's not checkers. Queen takes g6. King h8. Queen takes another pawn. Just not even taking this bishop yet, giving checks. And in this position, after king g8, de5, Magnus is only up 1 pawn. But what's devastating here is the weakness of the king. And watch as he puts this away. Rook g6 check, king f7. And now the only winning move. You would think, looking at this, it's queen h7. Just hunt the king down, brute force it. No. Rook c4. Get another piece into the game. There are 2 checks here for black, which look very scary. If rook d1, king g2. If queen d5, it looks like a fork. But you just sacrifice the rook. I mean, it's a sacrifice, because then you have check here, and then you hunt the king down like this. It's gonna take a little while after the black queen sacrifices. You can't go here because it's checkmate.
Yeah, so I hadn't even calculated nearly that far in advance. I didn't even bother looking at like what happens if rook d1 check, because that is kind of scary with the rook and the queen potentially able to give some checks, and that is pretty wild.
In one move, but Magnus sees all of that. Rook c4, give the rook. It's fine because I have this rook f6 idea. And in the game, we did get a check. I mean, it's called a spite check. You know, you know you're losing, you just give a check. King g2, rook to h8, and now the process. Rook f4 check, king e8, rook e6. Rook has to block. If the king continues to run, you don't make it very far. I play the stylish move. I can play rook f8 as well, but I sack my queen and you're just boxed in. It's checkmate. So you can't escape. You have to block. He trades, which doesn't even make sense when you first think about it. Like, why would you trade such an active piece? Because it doesn't matter. The king is so weak. Rook e4 check. And here Levon resigned.
So I'll stop it there. I guess it's pretty obvious that Levy did probably some research and took, a closer look at this game before making the video. But that being said, you can clearly tell how he's going a little bit more in the what ifs. Yeah, well, what if rook d1 check? Whereas I wasn't going as far into that calculation. If it were my own game, maybe I would do that differently. But in terms of the ideas behind the moves, obviously some of them were way over my head. Some of them I understood, but some of those ideas were definitely over my head, and certainly not to the caliber of Magnus, who is probably saw all of this, like the rook d4, for example, the only good move. I'm sure he played that because he calculated that far, and he just knows that black doesn't have anything. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you guys are interested in following my own personal journey to 2000 elo, I am growing my beard and not shaving until I reach that goal. I will leave a link for the video above, and you'll have one below as well, and I'll see you in the next one.